Welcome everybody to my F1 2018 Beginner's Guide. This video here is all about not just the F1 2018 season for beginners, but F1 in general, and hopefully it's going to be a great little guide for newcomers to the sport and anyone who's just slightly interested in Formula 1 and just wants to get a bit more knowledge about the sport so it's a bit more enjoyable viewing when they're watching races in this season. Welcome to my channel. I am an F1 YouTuber. I've only just started out, but I've always loved F1. I first started watching in 2006, and so I think my knowledge is pretty good. And so hopefully this gives you guys what you want. But if there's still any questions you have at the end of the video, chuck it down in the comments below. I'm pretty good at responding and pretty quick as well. So before we start off, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be covering today, and there's going to be 4 main topics in today's video, which is going to be the F1 season layout, the teams and drivers in the 2018 season, the tracks and races in the 2018 season, and some basic rules and regulations that you'll need to know if you're going to watch an F1 race for this season. So let's crack on, let's get into it, and we're going to start off with the season layout then. That's what I've got first on my list, and the F1 2018 season is the joint longest ever. 21 races across 5 continents, beginning in Australia on the 25th of March, only 2 weeks away now. I am buzzing, hopefully you are as well, and it's going to be ending in Abu Dhabi, the series finale again this season, that is, on the 25th of November, so a ridiculously long season. We've also got testing here and there everywhere, but if you're just starting to get into F1, like I imagine you are, if you're watching this video, that's not really any of your concern. But like I say, races, 21 of them this year, from March 25th to November 25th. The gap between each race ranges from 2 weeks to 3 weeks on a general basis. Sometimes we're really lucky and we just get a 1 week gap, which is fantastic. I love it when that happens. But in Formula 1 we do have what is known as the summer break, and that is that there is no races at all between the Hungarian and Belgian Grand Prix, which is about a month wait, so that's August time, and that is a very sad time in the world of F1. It's pretty quiet, and so that will be something to look out for if you're wondering around that time where any of the races are. So now we've covered the season as a whole, as a big general, I'm now going to just cover one specific race, like one example of a typical race weekend and how that works and how that is all laid out. And just for this example, we're going to use the USA Grand Prix in Austin, Texas. So every F1 weekend, including the USA race, consists of a Friday, a Saturday and a Sunday, and on each day everything happens a little bit different. So for the casual F1 fan, Fridays are pretty non-existent. There's 2 sessions of 1.5 hour practice sessions. It just gives the teams chance to practice on the track, the drivers, and install any new parts they might have for the car. Then on Saturday, maybe you might want to check out the F1, because that's the day of qualifying, and that will decide what order they line up on the grid for the race on the Sunday. Qualifying itself is broken down into 3 sessions, Q1, Q2 and Q3. It starts off on Q1, that's an 18-minute session, and people with the top 15 lap times go through to the next session, which is Q2. Then that's a 15-minute session, and then the top 10 go through to Q3, and that is a 12-minute session and the battle for what is known as pole position. That's a term that many people get confused with, and pole position, all it is the car that starts at the very front of the grid. So on your screen now, the silver car there, the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, is in pole position for that particular Melbourne Grand Prix. Each race lasts around about 2 hours, that's the maximum it can be, but each lap time varies, each track varies. And so for example, the US Grand Prix might have more laps than Silverstone Grand Prix, the English Grand Prix, and vice versa. It all depends on the lap length. So for example, these aren't the actual times, but I'm just, for a casual fan, just thought I'd explain. Say if the English track is 1 minute and the USA Grand Prix is 2 minutes, that means there'll be twice as many laps on the British Grand Prix. So it'll try and be around 1.5 hours to 2 hours sort of length. But if there's safety cars, so any crashes and they have to temporarily stop the race or anything like that, big parts of rain have to stop the race, for example, like that, then they will make time allocations, and if they cannot finish the laps within the time limit, then the 2 hour mark will be pushed on. So in Monaco, you might know what Monaco is, a ridiculously famous street circuit known for its ridiculously amount of crashes. That usually goes to a 2 hour limit rather than the lap limit. So that's just a quick explanation of that, and that is a quick rundown of the season layout. 21 races across 5 continents, qualifying, race. Oh yeah, on Sunday's the race. I nearly forgot that. On Sunday is obviously the big event, the big race. That is usually around 1 o'clock. They try and do it for British afternoon, although this season they are changing it up a bit. So the likes of USA, if you live there, they will have much more afternoon races. And so in general, they try and start them as a global around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. However, it does change from where you are. So that is something always to check before the weekend if you fancy watching the race. So moving on then, teams and drivers. This is usually the things that people are most interested in these sort of beginner's guides, and that's what makes sports great, is picking a team, picking a driver to support. And I definitely would advise, after watching a few races and then picking someone to follow. Maybe a team, maybe a particular driver, but picking something or someone to follow. I personally follow a team. However, some people, for example, like to follow Lewis Hamilton, and throughout his career have always followed him from McLaren to Mercedes, right from 2007 all the way up to 2018. So it's personal preference, but many people do like to support a driver or team from their particular home nation. And there's a total of 10 teams in the 2018 season, and a total of 20 drivers, with 4 world champions currently on the grid. That's not saying that there were 4 world champions last year, but there's 4 world champions previous that are in this current season. And they are Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen and Fernando Alonso. Last year's world champion was Lewis Hamilton, the Brit driving for Mercedes, and the Constructors' champion were Mercedes. It's their 4th championship in a row. They are very dominant at the moment. And so if you're a Glory supporter or want to pick a team that always want to win and that are a fantastic team week in, week out, Mercedes would definitely be one of those teams that you should be looking at. So what I'm going to quickly do is just go, I don't want to go through all the teams, all the drivers, because you're brand new to the sport, and so you don't want to be overloaded with so much information. So what I'm going to do is give you some notable teams and drivers that you might think about supporting, or that you generally just should know because they're the top dogs in general. So Mercedes are the world champions, and their drivers are Lewis Hamilton, the 4-time world champion now he is, and Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas is from Finland, and he's a relatively new driver to Mercedes, only joined last season. He's won 3 races in total and is a solid backup for them. Next is Ferrari. Everybody knows Ferrari, and their drivers are Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Raikkonen, 2 fans' favourites, especially Kimi Raikkonen. Both of them world champions. Raikkonen world champion once in 2007, and Sebastian Vettel world champion 4 times, all for Red Bull. Was in the hunt last season with Sebastian Vettel, but just missed out at the end, and so he'll be one to watch out for this season 100%. Red Bull are a very well-known team as well. I'm sure you all know Red Bull from the drinks brand, but they're also a team in Formula 1, and they're one of the top dogs as well. They're up there, and they will be for the championship fight this season. And they have 2 very, very quick up-and-coming drivers and very exciting drivers to watch. In Daniel Ricciardo from Australia, one of the nicest guys on the F1 grid, and the young hot prospect in Formula 1, Max Verstappen. Only 19 years old and 3 wins to his name. He's got incredible speed, incredible overtaking, slightly hot-headed at times, but he's still a fantastic driver, a future world champion without a doubt, and those 2 are very well matched. And if you're looking to support anyone, these 2 would definitely be candidates I would ask you to consider 100,000,000%. Fantastic drivers, a great team in Red Bull, and this season will be right up there at the top. The next team, again, might be someone you've heard of, and that is McLaren, the bright orange car this year, and their drivers are Stoffel Van Dorn in his 2nd season of F1, and more notably, the world champion Fernando Alonso. He's not been world champion since 2006, but he is a two-time world champion and definitely one of the best drivers on the grid without a doubt. You might know Fernando from his time in the Indy 500 and Daytona 500. He is a class act, and that McLaren looks very quick this year and could also potentially be fighting for the World Championship. So those four teams mentioned, very, very good indeed. And if you're going to support any of them, or if you're going to support a team that you want them to be winning, those four teams I would look at. The final team I'm going to cover today might be a bit interesting if you're watching this and you already know a bit about F1, but for newcomers, I'm going to tell you about Haas F1 team. So Haas are an all-American team, and that's why I'm going to be sharing it with you today, because a lot of new F1 fans, especially this season, are going to be from America, and so I felt it makes sense to present you with an American team. There's a Canadian driver with Lance Stroll who drives for Williams. However, I felt it'd be more fitting just for this video just to talk to you quickly about Haas. They're in their third full season of F1, and it's owned by Gene Haas, who also owns the Haas NASCAR racing team as well. My knowledge on NASCAR isn't as good, but I do know that he owns that team as well. Their drivers are veteran Romain Grosjean and fairly newcomer Kevin Magnussen. However, out of the two drivers, I think Grosjean is a class act, and if you were going to support that team, Grosjean is where I would push you to be heading in that team. He's their team leader. He's only ever been beaten by one teammate as Romain Grosjean, who's been in the sport now for a very long time. Fantastic driver and a team on the up are Haas. And so if you're new to F1 and from the States, Haas, I would look over there. I really would. Up and coming, American power, great little team. Now you might be wondering, what are these drivers trying to win? Well, obviously they're trying to win each race in particular. However, there's an overall season to consider, and there's two titles that the teams and drivers are going for. One is the Drivers' World Champion, and the other is the Team World Champion, which is also known as the Constructors' World Champion. So you'll probably hear people calling teams constructors rather than teams. Just thought I'd add that bit of knowledge there, because that is something that people might get tripped up on. So how does this work? How do people earn points to win the championship? Well, at the end of each race, points are awarded for where drivers finish. First place is given 25 points, second 18, third 15, and then so on until 10th place, which is the final point, which is 1 point. After 10th place, and if you do not finish, you get a fat 0 points. There's no points for fastest lap or pole position. So whatever happens, wherever you finish at the end of the race is where the points matter. And all it is pick up the most points, and whoever has the most at the end of the season wins. The drivers works that each driver has their own tally, and the teams is that both drivers in that team, their points are combined, so the team have all the points. So what this does mean is on occasion we have a driver world champion, but his team are not the team world champion. So that's something again that new fans might not be aware of, and I just thought I'd let you know here. But it's pretty straightforward. Win the most races, get the most points, and you can win the world championship. However, it has been seen before that the person who wins the most races, because they weren't the most consistent, they didn't win the world championship. So it's all about not just winning, but also being consistent. That's the key to F1. Winning races is fantastic, but you've got to be consistent, you've got to get those points, and that's why some drivers are the greats, like Hamilton, like Vettel. They're consistent, they're world class, and that's why they're world champions. Moving on to races and tracks. This has already been mentioned a little bit, so this won't take too long, but I'm just going to go back to some races that I think are particularly great, and that if you weren't fancying watching every race this season, there'd just be a couple of races just to pick up on and watch. So I would definitely recommend starting off at the Australian Grand Prix, the season opener, in a fortnight's time on the 25th of March. The season opener always gets off to a bang, and that would 100% be one I would recommend. China and Bahrain races 2 and 3 can be okay. Bahrain is a night race, and so if you fancy something a bit different there, that is definitely something worth considering. And China has a ridiculously long straight, which can lead to some great overtakes, but those two tracks I'm not a huge fan of. Azerbaijan, that is a quite interesting race actually. That is a street circuit like Monaco, very close barriers, and last year produced the best race of the season. A world-class race, one of the best races I've ever seen there. So that would be one to consider. Spain's always a great one as well in round 5. Round 6, Monaco. Monaco, it's just a spectacle. Not just seeing the cars going around the track, going at the limits, so close to those barriers, but the whole atmosphere of the circuit, the scenery, for those 2 hours sitting down in front of the telly, it's an absolute joy to watch. And so Monaco 100% would be one I would recommend. Canada, that follows that. That is also a fantastic race, a great circuit on the calendar, and it would be another one I would push you to watch. France is a new race for this season, and so I wouldn't be pushing this one too much if you're a brand new fan. However, there is a chance that drivers might make a few more mistakes there. We don't know, but I can't give you a huge review on that one because there's not been a France race for a very long time, since 2008, and they raced at a different circuit. Austria, you can probably miss that one if you're just planning on watching a few races this season. Great Britain, that's always an amazing race. That never fails to be fantastic. This year, again, was incredible. Although you can put your money on that Lewis Hamilton will win that race, but it's still a fantastic race nonetheless. Germany, that's an okay race. You could probably skip that one. The same with Hungary. Belgium is a fantastic track. Spa-de-Francorchamps in the Ardennes Forest. A giant hill that goes through it. It sounds daft, but Eau Rouge is what it's called, and it's the most notable corner on the F1 circuit. Treacherous in the past, but now has become what I would consider a gem on the circuit. The same as Italy straight after it, the home of Ferrari. And that one's just incredible. It's just straight, pretty much, is Italy, which makes the whole track so quick, and just the sea of red Ferrari fans everywhere. Again, that's incredible to watch. Singapore is a night race once again, and that is a street circuit night race, which again, that just adds a bit of spice. Something that no other race has is a street circuit in the night time. And Singapore last year again was a great race, and it's one of those that occasionally can kick up quite a stir, but usually isn't one of the better races of the season. Russia has moved back this season. It's usually around round 4, but it's round 16. Again, that's only just started coming on the calendar. That's a street circuit around the Winter Olympic track. Don't worry, it's not around the sprinting oval or anything like that. But it goes through all the venues around the outside, and it's a very scenic track again, although the race itself isn't particularly great. Japan, a lot of history at that circuit. Great track, Suzuka. Would be one I would recommend, especially because that'll get you hyped up for the USA Grand Prix, and they always do it right there. Fantastic opening before the race. They always put on a spectacle. The race is fantastic. A hill up to turn 1. It's so wide, turn 1, and pinches, which means all the cars are so close. Usually a few damages, a few crashes into turn 1, and that whole track is incredible. It's called the Circuit of the Americas, and it's in a great race. And that's around the time at the end of the season that the world champion is being decided. And the few races after it, it's interesting to watch because the world championship is being decided, and they're the key races for the end of the season. But if you had to watch any out of those final ones, I would say Abu Dhabi. So if I was to point you at specific races for this season, if you're going to make a quick list, I would say Australia, Monaco, Great Britain, Belgium, USA, Abu Dhabi. That's a basic list, because you heard me go through all of them, and there's more than those lists there. There's loads more. Canada, and like I say, great race. Azerbaijan, great race. Italy, great race. Japan, great race. Brazil as well, that's always a fantastic race. I didn't really mention that. Brazil, a great circuit, but the bare minimum, those are the ones I would point you to, and that's going to be my little roundup of the best races and tracks throughout this season. So the final topic of today's basic guide to F1 2018 is the rules and regulations. And obviously I'm not going to go into anything major, it's not going to be anything scary, but I just thought I'd go through some obvious rules that in some series might be allowed, but in Formula 1 aren't allowed, and just a few basic rules where if you're watching you might not quite understand what's going on. So at the beginning of each race there is a formation lap, so you will see all the cars do one lap of the circuit without racing, staying in the order they qualified before the race. So don't get worried about that if you all think they're just going to follow each other all race. There's the obvious rules and regulations such as no crashing into other drivers, obviously, no cutting the corner, gaining an advantage, overtaking someone by going off the track. There's none of that, and there's no what is known as illegal blocking, which means you can't keep going left, right to make sure they don't overtake. Because they're going at such high speeds, that's so dangerous to be doing that. What is allowed is to make one move and you've got to stay there. When you're watching F1 you'll understand then, what I've just said makes it sound awful that they do that, but it makes sense and it still does make for very good racing. So that's obviously the obvious ones, and there's loads of things like that. Anything stupid like that you can think of that is in place. But I just wanted to go through a few different rules that F1 has that maybe no other sport or motorsport has. So for example, every driver must make at least one pit stop in the race. Mainly this is to encourage viewership and to make it a bit more exciting. But what happens in the pit stop is that they must change their tyres onto a different compound. Now that sounds a bit scary, but in Formula 1 there's several different types of tyres and it's all about how hard they are. The softer the tyre, the quicker it goes. And so, for example, you have to use at least 2 tyres, types of compound, in a race. So, say Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel we will use. He comes in for a pit stop and goes onto the soft tyres. If he started on the hard tyres, then he's fine. But if he starts on the hard tyres and then swaps to another set of hard tyres, he has to come in again and go onto a set of soft tyres. So you need to go onto at least 2 different compounds, except if it's in wet conditions and then wet tyres are on the car, and that rule does not apply. Something else as well that most people don't realise is that there's strict rules and regulations on how the cars look and the design of the cars. Really, this is so teams don't go ridiculously out of hand. We've seen cars before in the past with 6 tyres, we've seen giant fans on the back of cars to make them go quicker. So the idea is that this makes the cars look a bit more uniform, but still a lot of time can be made in the smallest little piece of wing put on the car, the smallest bit of weight taken off. So the margins are so fine, that's what makes Formula 1 so incredible. The other thing I just want to quickly go over is what happens if there's a crash. Generally a safety car will come out, and what this is, it's a little Mercedes, will go out in front of all the drivers. They'll have flashing lights on top like an ambulance, and all the cars are not allowed to overtake until the safety car comes back in. So they'll line up behind him and wait until the track is all clear. And sometimes they employ a virtual safety car, which means all the drivers, all they have to do is slow down. So they'll all be going around at 50 miles an hour while people are on track cleaning up the mess. I was going to quickly go through flags in Formula 1, but I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Green, go. Red, if there's a red flag, that means the whole race has been cancelled and will resume later. Maybe there's been a life-threatening crash or the weather conditions are too bad. Yellow flag means there's been an incident in that particular area and just to be careful. A black flag means you've been disqualified. An orange and black flag means you have to come in and swap something because there might be a faulty part on your car and you have to get it checked. They're just some basic rules that I just wanted to quickly go through with you guys, just so you get a little bit more of an understanding about that. But that's it. That's the basic guide done. If this was too basic for some of you, then comment down below, because I was just going to do a 2018 guide for the season, something a bit more normal, something covering what's new about the 2018 season. Obviously this guide was more a very basic guide for those trying to get into the sport, and for old and young, for new, even for old, if you don't quite understand some of the things going on for Formula 1. Hopefully this did help you guys, and it'd be great to find out if I didn't, what can I do for next year, because I want to make this a yearly thing, going through what's a little bit new about the sport and what's old. Like I said, I'm a new channel, so this is all new to me, but hopefully it went well. If you want to learn more about Formula 1, like I said at the beginning of the video, chuck down a comment and I will reply pretty much instantly, I hope. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool. Other ways to do it is to check the Formula 1 official website. They're always pretty great with stuff like that. This is a fair bit of my information came from there, although it can look a bit scary to go on there. They also put great stuff up on their YouTube channel, like race highlights. That would be something I would recommend if you really wanted to get into F1, looking up a few of them. My recommendations would be Azerbaijan 2017 and Canada 2011. I know that sounds like a bit of an old one, but Canada 2011 was the best race I've ever seen in my life in Formula 1, and so there would be where I would look just to see what F1 can be. But just going through the Formula 1 YouTube channel is a great channel, to be fair. Also, this channel, I'm always pumping out videos about Formula 1, and hopefully that can give you a better insight. Just watching videos, learning about the sport is the best way to learn about it, as I say, apart from actually watching the sport yourself and discovering it for yourself. That's the best way. And finally, reading about the sport. There's loads of magazines out there, Autosport magazine, the F1 magazine, books. There's millions of them. I do book reviews on this channel. I've only done one so far, but I've nearly got the second one up and running. But that has been the end of today's video. Hopefully I helped some of you guys. That is obviously the plan for this video. Hopefully that has happened. But if not, I apologise. But more importantly, hopefully you have enjoyed and this hasn't been a waste of time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.